Hey guys, I'm Saion Gupta, founder at Necroda Kids, and today we are going to learn about the concept of Truthy and Falsy. So let's get started. Okay, so here we have our replet. So now let's start learning. So JavaScript variables are loosely or dynamically typed, and the language doesn't care how a value is declared or changed. So for example, we have let x equals 1, right? And now this is not this is the now integer data type, but we can change it to any data type. We can just change it to a string. This was a number, now it is a string. Now it is an array, right? So JavaScript does not care. Seemingly different values equate to true when compared with double equals true, that is loose or abstract equality, because JavaScript effectively converts each to a string representation before comparison. So over here, JavaScript, what it does when you are comparing with double equals true, it converts each value both on the left hand side on the right hand side. It converts both of them to a string effectively, right? And then compares. So then if it gets the same value, then basically it gives true. For example, on the left hand side it converted it to a string, so it converted it to this. On the right hand side it was already a string, so it has remained the same. So in strings 1 equals to in strings 1, so that gives us true. Then this over here converted to a string, right, like this, by JavaScript. And then this, when it gets one item in the array, it effectively does this, right? So now this is also true. And finally this is a string, and when it finds one item, it changes it like this. So now this also gives us true. A more obvious false result occurs when comparing with triple equals to, that is strict equality, because the type is considered. So for example, when we try to do this, it does not compare, so it does not convert it does not convert any of the arguments that are on the left hand side on the right hand side to a string. So it does not basically it does not basically what it does not convert anything to a string representation. What it does, it checks the value and it checks the data type. So over here the data type is number, value is 1. Over here the value is 1, but the data type is string, so this gives us false. Over here the data type is number, value is 1. Over here the data type is an object, but value is 1, so this is also giving us false, because both arguments should match, data type and value, both requirements, right, should be fulfilled. So now this is a string and its value is 1. This is an array and its value is 1, so this also gives us false, right? Truthy versus falsy values in JavaScript. As well as a type, each value also has an inherent Boolean value, generally known as either truthy or falsy. Some of the rules that determine how non-Boolean values are translated into true or false values are a little bizarre. Understanding the concepts and the effect on comparison helps with debugging JavaScript applications, alright? So the following values are always false. So these all are always false. False is always false. 0 is always false. The Boolean value, the Boolean representation of these values is always false. So false is already a Boolean, so its value is false. 0's Boolean representation gives false. Minus 0 gives us false. Big int 0 gives us false. Empty strings gives us false. Null gives us false. Undefined gives us false. And nan, not a number, also gives us false. Everything else is true. Everything apart from this all have the values true. That includes 0 in a string. That is also true. False in a string. That is also true. An empty array and an empty object is also true. A empty function is also true. So everything apart for this has the in Boolean is always true, right? So a single value can therefore be used within conditions. For example, now because every value has a Boolean representation, a single value can therefore be used within conditions like this. So if the value has a Boolean representation of Truthy, it will go in this. Else, if the value has a Boolean is one of these, if the value is one of these, then it will go into the else, and whatever we run in the else will be executed. Pretty clear. Now loose equality comparisons with double equals to. Unexpected situations can occur when comparing truthy and falsy values using the double equals loose equality, like this. So over here I have this table. I'll move my camera up. Yeah. Okay. So as you can see, this is the table over here. So let's see. So over here we have in double equals to, what happens when we are comparing true with true, right? So it is basically like, if when we are doing true is equals to true, then it will give us true. When you are doing true equals false, it will give us false. True equals 0 in double equals to will give us false. True equals empty string in double equals to will give us false. True equals null in empty string will give us double equals to will give us false. True equals undefined with double equals to, it will give us false. True equals nan will give us false. True equals infinity will give us false, and that is quite confusing because infinity is true. But because double equals to can cause unexpected results when we don't expect them to come, right? True is not it is giving true in a double equals to, that true is not equals to an array or an object. An object cannot be compared, that makes sense, but an array also it is giving false, right? So let's before continuing in this table, let's look at some rules. False, zero and empty strings are all equivalent, right? Null and undefined are equivalent to themselves and each other, but nothing else. Nan is not equivalent to anything, including another nan, and that basically makes sense. Not a number. Nan is used to represent not a number. So that not a number can be anything else except for a number. So you cannot say nan is equals to nan. It's like saying any number is equals to number. That is not true, right? So that's why nan you cannot say is equals to another nan. Infinity is truthy but cannot be compared to true or false. So infinity cannot be compared to true or false. An empty array is truthy, yet comparing with true is false and comparing with false is true. So when we compare an empty array with false, it will give us true. But when we compare it with true, it will give us false. Though an empty array is truthy, right? So that kind of also makes sense, because when you're doing double equals to, it gives you a string representation. String representation of false will be empty string. String representation of empty array will be empty string, right? So now false, that is empty string in string representation, and empty array empty array, that is empty string in string representation, both are now equal. uh, Empty string and empty string is equal, so now that gives us true, right? But when give it true string representation is what is the string representation of true? So true string representation is some text in a string, right? And an empty array string representation is an empty string. So some text in a string is not equals to empty string, right? So that gives us false. Kind of makes sense. Then let's compare with false. False compared with true gives us false. False compared with false gives us true. False compared with 0 gives us true. False compared with empty string gives us true. False compared with null gives us false, though null is falsy, but null and undefined are equal to themselves and each other only, right? So false compared with undefined gives us false. False compared with nan gives us false, because nan is equal to nothing including itself. It's another nan, right? Infinity compared with false will give us false, because infinity cannot be compared with true or false. Empty array compared with false will give us true, and empty object that cannot be compared will obviously give us false. Then we have 0. So 0 compared with true will give us false. With false it will give us true. With 0 it will give us true. With empty string it will give us true. With null it will give us false. With undefined it will give us false. With nan it will give us false. With infinity it will give us false. Empty array it will give us true, because 0 string representation empty string, empty array string representation empty string. So that's pretty cool. And then with an object obviously false. Then empty similarly we are doing with empty string, but let's just skip this because it is like the same as 0, right? And then let's come to null. So null is always equals to null and undefined, nothing else, right? Everything else is false. Null is only equals to itself and undefined. Pretty good. Undefined is also same thing. Everything is false. It is just equals to null and itself, right? Pretty cool. Now with nan, nan is never equal to anything including another nan, right? So everything will be false. Infinity, it is just giving true with another infinity, right? Or everything else is false. Then empty array, this is giving true 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 over here for false, 0 empty string, right? Because its string representation is empty string. Empty string equals empty string. 0 string representation empty string, so empty string equals empty string. And false string representation also empty string, same thing. And object cannot be compared with anything, so everything will be false. We come to the next table afterwards. Now we are on strict equality comparison where triple equals to. So the situation is clearer when using a strict equality comparison, because the value types also must match, right? So now we'll have the table over here. This is for triple equals to. So now true will be only equals to itself, false will be only equals to itself, um, 0 will be only equals to itself, because it is also checking the data type when you are giving triple equals to, right? So that's why when compared with empty string, 0's data type, 0's string representation is the same, but the data type of empty string and 0 are different, so that's why it is giving false. Empty string compared with itself gives us true. Null compared with itself only gives us true. Undefined compared with itself only gives us true. Nan will always give us false. It is nothing is equal to nan. Infinity compared to itself only gives us true. Empty array. Now this is quite cool. So when we are comparing empty array with an empty array, that is giving false. Let's just test it once so that we are pretty clear about it. So more tools, developer tools. So we'll do, sorry, okay, so now we are gonna do empty array equals empty array. That gives us false. Comment down below if you know why. And then object compared to everything will always give us false, right? And there's only one rule for triple equals to, and that is, the only exception is that nan, which remains stubbornly inequivalent to anything. So now recommendations for working with truthy or falsy values. First of all, avoid direct comparisons. For example, instead of doing if x equals false, that will only check if if it will only run if x is false, 0 empty string or an empty array. Do if not x. It runs if x is false, 0 empty string, nan, null or undefined, right? So always use not x instead of doing direct comparison. Pretty cool advice. Use triple equals to always. Never use double equals to. It leads to a lot of problems. So if x equals y, it will run if x and y are both truthy or both falsy, right? Example, x equals none and y equals undefined. This will all run even if x is equal to null and y is equal to undefined, because both have the value false. Use triple equals to. Runs if x and y are identical values. They are identical. So except when both are none. When both are none, it will still not run. It runs if x and y are identical values with the exception of both if a nan, if the if statement would not run, right? Pretty cool. And then convert to real boolean values where necessary. For example, instead of doing if x triple equals to y, right? If runs if x and y are identical except when both are nan, use if boolean x equals to boolean y, or not x equals not y. So what is not? For example, when you do not y, so if y is, for example, 0, that is a false value. So it will convert, the not will convert it to true. And then another not will again convert true to false, right? So this is how it works. So run if x and y are identical, including when either or both are nan. Very cool. And I hope you like the video, guys. Thank you. Smash like button, subscribe, dab.